The opinions of the guests and host are their own and do not represent the opinions of Ironclad, the Border Patrol, or the Department of Homeland Security.
Dude, this is something that is wild because it feels that it's against the logical thought of it. But when you report on the streets inside criminal organizations, it's just the way it is. They are vouching for Trump so bad because of the rhetoric of Donald Trump on the border. The rhetoric is no one's gonna come in. We're gonna deport everyone. We're gonna close the fucking border. We're gonna fix that border. If you say that, this means money for cartels. It's like, okay, so now no one is gonna come in. This is gonna become so much more expensive because we're gonna have to work so much more to get you in. We're gonna have to go to desert areas, work tunnels, do this, do that, bribe border patrol officers, and this and that. So even though that could be or not be true, well, like when a president like Donald Trump comes strong against like crossing the border, they're like, okay, here comes some money. So many of these guys are vouching for Trump because they know that when Trump was president back then, they were making so much money.
We cut through the partisan talking points. We're not interested in perpetuating fear. We're interested in seeking truth, hearing what's really going on America's borderland. Welcome to Borderland, an Ironclad original. My guest today is renowned journalist Luis Chaparro. Luis is based on the U.S.-Mexico border and has been reporting on Mexican organized crime for more than 15 years. He has extensively covered activities of drug cartels and human smuggling in Mexico, providing detailed insights into their operations, leadership, and the impacts of their activities on the Mexican society. Luis is a personal friend of mine, and I was excited to finally get him on the podcast. I've been trying to get him on for a while. He's a very busy man, and some of the stuff he told us today was insane. I think this is one of my favorite podcasts by far because of his personal experiences and close connection with the cartel. I think you guys really enjoy this one. Oh man, it's been a while to try and get you on here. We're just gonna get started, man. This is gonna be because we've talked, because I'm very familiar with your work. We'll just dig right into this, man. How's everything been with you?
All good, man. All good. Keeping busy, you know.
Oh, for sure. The content that you create seems to be plentiful. There's tons of it out there.
Yes, man. It's just a lot, but just the way it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, for my audience, before we get into it, can you give them a quick bio of who you are and what you've been up to?
Absolutely. My name is Luis Chaparro. I'm a U.S. Mexico-based journalist, mostly covering drug trafficking, criminal organizations in Latin America, and immigration.
Awesome, brother. Yeah, man, your stuff has been popping up all over the place. You've talked to some of the biggest names out there. A lot of the stuff that you've been able to put out has been very beneficial for me to really kind of dig deeper into understanding, you know, when we talk about the immigration and the cartel and the whole conversation, you know, your journalism is always somewhere threaded into that. And I deeply appreciate your efforts in telling these stories. You know, in recently, you know, obviously there's new president shift, there's all kinds of things happening. And, you know, first and foremost, what is the current like topic probably that's the most that you're seeing right now that you want to report to, or that you've been talking about that's probably the most concerning or important information?
I'll definitely say that the intertwine between criminal organizations, also called drug cartels, I think it's just an old way to call these organizations. Like they are everything but drug cartels. So the intertwine between criminal organizations and immigration, I think that's really the topic that it's right now keeping me most busy. First of all, because there's a new president in Mexico, so we're gonna see what is she gonna do with the whole immigration issue, which the past president Andrés Manuel López Obrador had sucked at it really, and put many thousands of migrants in danger, but also citizens of both sides of the border. But also because in the past 5-6 years, immigration became one of the biggest money makers for criminal organizations in both sides of the border, which is also interesting to see developing. So right now, I think that intertwining it's going to be very interesting to see.
You know, on top of that, you're saying illegal immigration. We're talking also drug trafficking, but on top of that, there's something that I think is of concern for me is the potential for in the illegal immigration process. There's a potential for terrorist organizations slipping through the cracks, right? Which causes, homeland security issues. And so this is like a multifaceted subject that is. You and several others are out there trying to tell those stories. With money being made on both sides of this, you say on the American side and the Mexican side, is that somehow, I would say criminal organizations, are they trickling over into the United States side and becoming a more a solid force here in the United States to kind of help facilitate movement?
I think what is happening is that this illegal industry, we're talking about like people trying to get illegally into the US, right? Not the asylum seekers, although criminal organizations are also making some money out of them, some like extortion or openly lying to them and trying to, like we'll get you through the system, right? Which is lies. But we're talking mostly all of these people who's trying to get into the US illegally and then disappear within the system inside the US. Yeah. This is making so much money right now that cartels found a way not to have their own people working on the US side, but to lure border residents to make some money out of the same business and serve somewhat as clients. So the way this is working right now, the border, is Mexican criminal organizations have contacts all the way through Central and South America, right? Venezuela, Colombia, El Salvador, etc. And then they make migrants pay for the whole trip, right? Well, when I say it's basically they extort them to pay for the whole trip until they get to the point of the border, like Ciudad Juárez or Tijuana, Matamoros. And then they basically outsource the rest of the trip. They share part of that money to U.S. citizens that say, okay, so we're going to get them across, which is the hard part. But once they are across, you're going to pick them up at the border and drive them past checkpoints up to different places, right? Chicago, New York, Dallas, depends. Yeah. And that money, you're going to make that money is going to be your money, right? So, but this is the thing. Once you're an American citizen, start working for them as a transporter, right? You only pick up people at the border, then take them to Denver or whatever. Once you're doing that, you belong to that organization, knowingly or unknowingly, right? So when you move people for someone else, or you try to move people on your own, these guys are going to show up and say like, hey, we learned that you actually moved 5 buddies that were not us. So first warning. And yes, man, I've been interviewing a lot of people down here in the area of El Paso, Sunland Park, Las Cruces, that have been threatened and shot at by Mexican criminal organizations on U.S. soil.
Because these individuals who are on the American side are transporting, but not realizing what organization is the owner of that, I guess, package, if I can use a term. What's interesting about that conversation is that what I've seen recently is, the massive influx of immigration, which is getting just directly, the give ups. They go right to the Border Patrol agent, they get processed, and they claim asylum immediately and go. So that's not even part of that conversation. We're talking about people who are decisively trying to avoid detection. They were trying to evade, which makes it even scarier. Those who are coming over seeking asylum, they're presenting right there at the Border Patrol station. They're processing, they're rolling their fingerprints, they're doing all the things that they do. But the other ones who are trying to circumvent a system raise a concern. What are they hiding from? Why are they avoiding detection? And so, that becomes a very lucrative space because those are the ones who are more challenging. Those are the ones who are trying to get from a point A to point B with reason.
Exactly. And when you think about like also the amount of money these criminal organizations are requiring for these type of individuals, let's say the money starts from whatever, from $5,000 to $15,000 per person. Some of them, they do have family in the US. They just don't apply on the political asylum system, whatever, like Mexicans, right? Like most of the Mexicans who are trying to get into the US, you don't apply for political asylum. It's I think it's like 0.1% of a Mexican for a Mexican to have chances to apply for political asylum, which is nothing. Many of them, they say, okay, you know what? I have a cousin, a brother who's already living in the US. I'm going to ask for money and then pay him back. They gave $5,000. There you go. I just need to get across the border and I'll find my own way there. But there's a bunch of Chinese nationals, Russian nationals, a lot of like different nationalities that are not really the usual for this continent to be getting across the border. Yeah. Those are the guys who are paying big bucks. So now Mexican cartels, they know, they're like, okay, the Chinese are paying. I mean, let's not fuck around Mexicans right now. Let's just try now to lure in and open up our business for Chinese nationals who are the ones who are like giving us good money. The thing is, they're using fake identities, they're using fake documentation, they're using all sorts of different tricks to get across and kind of like disappear the US. And yeah, that question remains, like, who is these people? Why do they have so much money? Why are they bringing so much money and then trying to get across illegally and kind of disappear within the country with the help of criminal organizations, right?
Yeah, that raises a big concern, especially like you said, some of those countries that's not common coming across. You know, the uptick in Chinese nationals coming into the country. You know, immigration is immigration, but Chinese nationals now and who are circumventing the system, that becomes like the fear of like, is this potentially some kind of orchestrated, I wouldn't say attack per se, but infiltration, you know, like a militarized, you know, technique, if you will.
Exactly. And more than that, like what I feel is the biggest threat, it's okay, if the let's say by chance, just by chance, no one is really trying to harm the US, right? Like all these are Chinese families, whatever. But, you know, the occasion makes the thief. So when you start making so much money as an organization, and then criminal organizations in China are also like, you know what? These guys are making a lot of money. We can make a lot of money too. But I mean, if we have a path to go in, we might, because there's an opportunity, right? So this is empowering criminal organizations on the all around the world, right? This is empowering Mexican criminal organizations. This is empowering gangs like Tren de Aragua in Venezuela that used to be just a gang in Venezuela. Now they're huge. Now they have power. Now they have saying across this border. Even those are the guys extorting political asylum seekers. Asylum seekers at this border. When you see the border here between Ciudad Juárez and El Paso, you have all this concertina wire set up by the Texas governor, right? So these guys cut off through this concertina wire and they set up their own checkpoints and they extort their own people. Venezuelans, okay, if you're in the list, you can go and request asylum. But if you're not on the list, well, you have to pay us. So this is a money-making machine for all these, like even small to the biggest criminal organizations. And that's where I think it's the danger, because there's going to come a point where these criminal organizations are going to be huge and empowered and billionaire enterprises that are going to have a saying on what's happening on both sides of the border.
That's scary. You know, going back where you said that they're luring American citizens to participate in, you know, this criminal activity. Have you seen, or do you know exactly how they're luring them? Is it like Craigslist or you know, are they putting out ads, or is it just communication like by mouth?
Yeah, it's basically the old word of mouth where, you know, your cousin suddenly brings up a new car and you're like, dude, how the hell did you make that money to pay that car? And he's like, dude, I'm in this business and it's paying off well. Because they're getting up like from 2 to 4K per person just to move them from one side of the border to another. So if you move, like, let's say my guy who I know who lives in Las Cruces, and he's been doing this for the past 3-4 years, he's moving 5 to 10 people at a time. That's a lot of money he's making on a weekend, right? He moves 5 guys on Friday, 10 guys on Saturday, another 10 on Sunday. And if they're paying 2K by the lowest each, he's making some big bucks.
Yeah, he's making a lot of money. I mean, some over 25K a month. That's a significant amount of money.
Yeah, exactly. Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy to see. I saw a story, and I know it's true to some fact, but I don't know the exact details. But there was an ad put in a Craigslist for a job, and 4 college kids essentially, applied for it, and they showed up, and they were actually asked to be transporting drugs for the cartel. And when they denied it, they ended up forcing them to kill each other. It was just kind of this crazy story, and I'm like, man, that's some ruthless stuff. And I'm sure this is one story of many. Is there a lot of things that happen like that with the cartel trying to get people to help transport dope?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways, like that kind of way, like they're basically forcing them, threatening them to kill them if they don't. Also, I don't know if you remember, they arrested this congresswoman in Matamoros, and she had a clean record. She's a congresswoman for the city of Matamoros, and she's a border crosser. And all of a sudden, she's picked up with several kilos of cocaine. She kept her mouth shut. She didn't say anything. But eventually, I guess when she felt that the U.S. government was actually protecting her, she came out and said, well, they forced me to do it. Like they literally showed up at my house. They knew I am a congresswoman. I get across the border because apparently their kids weren't to school in the U.S. The border is like regular border life. So she was perfect to be a drug mule. And so she got caught. She took the sentence. And only afterwards, she said, well, I was forced to by these guys who started threatening me. And this was not my first time. I've been doing this for the past year, right? So they're doing this kind of stuff in the Tijuana, San Diego area. They're still using the old magnet technique, right? They set a somewhat medium load on your car with a strong magnet, and they follow you. If you make it across, they'll pick your car up, retrieve the drugs, and you never knew. Or they'll use you as bait. They'll call themselves an anonymous tip to CBP officers. They're like, hey, there is this white SUV who has 2 kilos on the back of the car. So they know when this black SUV is coming, boom, they find the load, right? And a different car, while these guys are distracted, goes on packed with kilos, right?
Yeah, it's not uncommon, but I've never heard them pinning it on someone innocent who has no idea that they have the drugs, magnet,
Yeah, dude, like
that's terrifying.
There's a lot of people in TJ that their morning routine includes just checking around their own cars, right? Like, okay, let's see if no one like put some, and several of them have found drugs and magnets, so they have to call the police right there. Like, hey, I have something here in my car, but just not mine. It's wild, man.
Oh, that's insane. That's insane. What are some of the changes you've seen from today's cartels to, say early 2000s? Like, what are some of the big significant things that have made them stronger and more powerful?
Oh man, they've changed a lot. I think still by the 2000s, they still were, for the most part, trafficking drugs. That was the business, right? The business is, okay, we're gonna traffic drugs because they have a strong value in the US, and we can produce them, manufacture them, and package them on this side of the border, just like a regular maquiladora, like a regular factory, right? But then eventually they started getting into other stuff. They started noticing how getting into the political system pays off, right? They start bribing politicians. The politicians still on top, they bribe them. They hand it over contracts, right? Let's say, hey, we want to make money out of your new presidency, or you're a new governor. If we help you win, you'll give us all the contracts to build hospitals, highways, et cetera, and that's where we're going to be making huge money. That started happening. Then they started getting into natural resources, right? Monopolizing natural resources to a point where today, a faction of the Sinaloa cartel in Chihuahua, one of the driest regions in northern Mexico, it's controlling creeks, rivers, lakes. They basically own water right now in Chihuahua, which is it's mind blowing. It's dangerous. So I think right now they're mostly criminal enterprises that are being empowered by their own criminal insurgencies, right? They don't have sicarios anymore. They do have these fucking insurgencies where they armed to the teeth. You've seen them with several miniguns, RPGs, all these sorts of stuff and new techniques, right? They're using night vision to ambush people at night, drones, like these drones that are dropping bombs into like enemies, not all this kind of stuff, which is like, dude, in the 2000s, they were carrying AK-47s and their sombreros and trafficking drugs. And if you fucked up with the laws, they're going to get you. Probably they were kidnapping, extorting some of them, trying to make a buck. But now they're doing now they are calling the shots. It's not the politician who's now like, okay, I'll allow you to operate if you pay me some part of this business. Now it's the other way around. They'll be like, okay, you want to run for mayor? You want to run for governor? Okay, you pay us and we'll make your campaign. And then you're going to do what we are telling you to do. These guys are on top, man, now, and it's crazy.
Thank you, Warner Brothers, for sponsoring this video. If I had a time machine, I would definitely want to go back in time to the Wild West. But after watching this movie, you realize real fast how dangerous it was.
No.
I love this movie because it had love and romance.
And here you are.
But also death.
You build. They will burn down.
It had some historical events that happened trying to take over the West and find what's home.
You and I are standing guard in one of the last great open spaces.
And at the same time, you have people that are conflicted about what is theirs and who owns what first.
I will take from you until you are wiped clean from this land.
Yeah, the West was a wild one for sure.
You want to say?
You guys go check it out and you'll love it. Yeah, when you talk about their guns and their firepower, one question I have is where have you found out where they're getting those from? And the other question to that is like, who's training them how to use it?
For the most part, they're getting these guns from the U.S. manufacturers. It's basically an ant trafficking. Little by little, they start getting huge amounts of firepower. When you're talking about like stuff like miniguns, which are not easy or not cheap, they also set up middlemen that they don't even know what the fuck they're doing. They're like, I'm just selling these things to another gringo here in Dallas, which are components, not the whole minigun, right? So they don't even know what they're building. Then this guy who knows exactly what he's doing, he starts building up the miniguns, shipping them south and charging. He starts building stuff. I was reading the other day this indictment for a guy named Alex who didn't know what the fuck he was really doing. He was just selling parts to a bigger, arms seller in Texas. And this bigger arms seller was putting together miniguns, several miniguns, at least 20, for around 14 to 16K each, and then selling them for 250K to Mexican drug cartels. So, yeah.
I was going to say 16. Yeah, if it costs him about 16 to make, interesting. Damn, some 200, absolutely.
Yeah, he was making big bucks. And so U.S. intelligence on that report I read, said that there are at least 20 miniguns in the hands of criminal organizations in Mexico recently trafficked. So that this is how they're getting their hands on all of this stuff. Now, another good way to get a hand on RPGs or these kind of like most difficult stuff to hide across the border is through the southern border in Mexico, through Chiapas and Guatemala, which is a very open, wide border. No one's really looking. No one's really like there to know what's being trafficked from that side of the border. So they get them, some of them from Russia, some of them from Middle East, transport them to Colombia, then to Colombia all the way up through the southern border. There's also a lot of corruption within the Mexican military where they say, well, we acquired all these explosives and all of a sudden we lost track of them. So who knows where they are, right?
Yeah, I think there's one of the countries right now, I'm not sure if it was Venezuela or something, is missing a ton of firearms right now. And
pretty sure that it's now in Michoacan or Jalisco.
Right. Who's training them? Is there any kind of intel on who's training them? I'll tell you from my experience of someone who is highly trained at some point in my life, they don't look technically and tactically sound like a special operations military. So I don't see that level of experience yet. You know, maybe when the Zetas originally came out, they looked probably more like that. Right now, it seems like it's kind of changed. It's more like the more people with firepower still creates, you know, a security sense and still creates chaos. So it doesn't look like they're highly trained individuals. They just look like they have high firepower and able to get their hands on it, which still is a threat.
Absolutely, man. That's exactly what is happening. Exactly what you're saying. There have been some videos that I've come to see where you can see those guys are trained. You know how they pick up their arms. You know how their body language, how they're breaking inside a house. You know, with this crust kind of thing. You know, what trained people does. But that's only a few, and it's probably just the guys who are, you know, taking care of the security of like a main target, El Mencho, El Mayo, right? Like these guys, it's not widespread, that knowledge for the most part. It's just little like small kids, teenagers, whatever, that they got hands on their like, just take these AK, take these whatever. And in case you need to use it, just fucking go and like blast them, right? Yeah. And they use them like that, but they're not trained. I also watched this clip the other day of these guys belonging to the Salazar cartel in Sonora, right across Arizona, and they were clearing a house. They were after a target, but you could see how they're clearing houses, clearing vehicles, you know, like with special operators techniques. I mean, they were like smashing windows with the back of the boom, and the boom opening the car. Then another guy went in on the other side of the car. They enter the house on a crossed. This kind of thing they do. They're clearing up the second floor, and they're like information. They're always on comms, you know, like communicating with each other. And one of the guys had a patch that said FES, which is the Fuerzas Especiales. I can't remember the S, but it's basically Mexican elite soldiers, like the. It's a very elite, secret kind of like police within the Mexican military. So this guy was very probably the one training his own team, and he was probably at one point was part of this elite group of Mexican military. We're talking these like they're probably a handful of these very well trained guys. For the rest, for the most part, all the rest of the sicarios are really just people with high power, but they don't even know how to use it. Sometimes you'll see guys on a 22, which is basically a low caliber gun, but they have this scope and night vision and whatever. So you see like, why would you need a scope of this 22, you know? But it's just for them to look like the baddest MFs around. You know? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I would love to see that video if you have access to it, man. That'd be interesting to kind of watch and see their skills. Yeah, that's kind of what I've seen. Like just seeing a lot of the footage and going out there and like really finding some of the stuff online. It's what it felt like. It felt like young men take those jobs because it pays good money for them, and they'll shoot anything or whatever they're told to do. I haven't seen necessarily a really high quality, tactical sense at the moment, but I believe you're probably correct in the sense of like the higher ups, the guys, the big dogs who manage these organizations probably do have some well-trained individuals working for them. So in the sense of protection.
Exactly. Yeah.
Crazy times. I've seen 50 cals. I've seen all kinds of stuff online, what they have.
Yeah. These armored vehicles and monstros. Also, they're getting better and more sophisticated. They're at the beginning it was just like a F-150 with a bunch of like
metal,
metal around. But now they're getting like more sophisticated on their own monsters, right? Like they're using different material, different stuff, and
it's starting to look like early tactical vehicles in the military overseas. Like it's definitely starting. I'm curious to see how much they are pulling from the war footage and some of the, the terrorist kind of ISIS videos and stuff like that, and how much they're using for their own tactics. Sometimes it seems very similar in like maybe years later, kind of dated, but still similar.
Yeah, I think since they are very resilient criminal organizations, and the internet has changed the game for everyone. So they're watching all the time footage from Ukraine, from no sé qué, from this side and the other. And they're kind of like testing, right? They don't have anything to lose. They're just like, what if we strap these kind of like drone that is used to I don't know, spray crops, which is a bigger drone. What if we strap it with a night vision camera and some released, device, so we can like release a bomb, whatever. So they're like
something they probably saw off of the Ukraine-Russian war, and then it gave them an idea. I know that for a fact. Yep, I know for a fact there's a lot of use right now of drones in the Mexican side, and not so much to deliver packages per se, but using for, like you said, for videoing, surveillance, but as well as I've heard they are using it to drop bombs on their own people, which is like, that's insane. That's a huge escalation of skill set.
Exactly, the whole propaganda, because like the Cartel Jalisco, right? In Michoacán, they have their own unit called Operadores Especiales del Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, like drone operators of CJNGs. And that's a patch they use. That's the way they identify themselves. They're like a specific unit of drone operators. So yeah, they're learning, man. They're learning and they're experimenting. And if they're not stopped, they're just going to get better and better.
Has there been any conversation in any of your investigation about the weapons that were left in Afghanistan potentially being brought through and used by the cartel currently now? Has there been any proof of that?
I haven't like really found any evidence or someone with a strong sourcing or someone who is kind of like reliable that actually says that that's happening. I mean, at least on my
it might be in a couple years. It might.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yes. Probably still like under the radar or whatever, but I'm pretty sure. Yes.
Yeah. And something you mentioned that I think is important for the audience to hear is social media. Social media has done two parts. One, it helps us be more informed. Information gets sent left and right more often, and it gets people some information. But the other side is it romanticizes the cartel lifestyle. And there's a culture that loves the idea of being connected to, these organizations, the power, the cars, the money, the women, and you start drawing in these young, impressionable kids. It's almost like gangs in the early 90s in LA. You're looking for someone, you're looking for love, you're looking for community, you're looking for importance and power, right? You want to be bigger than yourself. And so people join these organizations when they're looking for that, something that's missing in their lives. And social media has romanticized it. The music, the corridos, these singers, the bravado and the fame essentially that comes with that has almost made it like it's the best recruiting system they've ever had.
Exactly, man. This is by design. This is not by chance. I mean, right now, what I know is they're investing enough money to be significant on social platforms, like people who is managing their own platforms, putting out videos and corridos and this and that. Because as any other war, this war is also being fought over the internet, right? It's being fought on the streets, but it's also like who's better represented online, who has better videos and more cruel and more violent and more whatever online who's recruiting more people online, who's, so they do have managed. There's a bunch of accounts on X right now who are basically paid by drug cartels to be propaganda. One of the guys I had the opportunity to interview, which is probably the biggest player in the Sinaloa cartel that I've interviewed myself, which is Damaso Lopez Serrano, El Minilic. He basically grew up. He's El Chapo is his grandfather, and so he grew up with a whole top guys of the Sinaloa cartel. He's now in the U.S. He served 5 years, and he's snitching now against everyone in the Sinaloa cartel. So I interviewed him in the Los Angeles area last year, and I remember he told me that early on in 2016, he had paid several people to make a huge campaign online against Los Chapitos, the sons of El Chapo, because he wanted people to make them, to perceive them as bad players, right? To perceive like, no, they're not going to be able to keep up with the cartel. They're the baddest players in the Sinaloa cartel, whatever. So he paid people to start a smear campaign against them. And that was early on in 2016. These new campaigns are absolutely widespread right now and established within criminal organizations. So whenever we see something online, we need to question ourselves, like, is this real or is this propaganda, right? Does this sound like propaganda by the cartel? Or is this actually like something that just popped up, which is never the fucking case, you know?
These are psychological operations campaigns happening right in front of our faces, and most people don't even realize it.
Yeah, and the corridos and the singers,
the corridos
all of that stuff.
Yeah, corridos, those who listen don't know that. They're kind of like they're Spanish music that kind of, again, romanticizes the lifestyle of cartel. Sometimes the cartel bosses, they pay these corrido or these singers to create songs about them, to tell their legacy, to tell their story through these almost folktale style music. And it's huge. It's part of the culture of this. It's drawn so much attention that it's actually caused death by musicians because of corridos that are against the other cartels and everything.
Exactly, man. That's the name of the game, and it's crazy because the guys who are best at it are Sinaloa cartel, right? They have the most money invested in this stuff. When you hear corridos by the Jalisco cartel or Carteles Unidos or all these different other cartels, even Los Zetas back then, the corridos aren't that good. They're not so well written, so well produced. They're not recorded on the best studios. But when you talk about Sinaloa cartel, you have Peso Pluma singing songs about El Nini, about Ivan Archibaldo, about El Chapo, about this and that. And he's top of the fucking game right now, man. He's everywhere in the world.
He's like Drake. He's like Drake, or he's one of our big artists. But instead, for the corridos, they have their own version singing their music.
Exactly, and he can't deny that the money he started his career on comes from the Sinaloa cartel. I remember being in Culiacan in Sinaloa several years ago, and they were watching videos of this young kid, you know, like with the weird hair and the mullet, and you know, and I was like, who's that guy? And all of these guys were loving him, and they're like, well, this is a Pluma, bro. He's a great fucking artist. And El Jefe, Ivan Archibaldo back then, head of Los Chapitos, they're like, well, Jefe, he's putting so much money on his career, and he's gonna come out good.
Yeah, his career blew up, went from zero to hero, from nobody to well known, and he's one of the most. And he's had to cancel a few of his own shows because of some of the threats that come upon him. It's just a crazy thing that's how deep their marketing, their recruiting goes. And I don't think a lot of people understand how deep it goes. We watch the news, we see publications and different journals talk about these things, but the outside of it, right? The marketing, like I said, the psychological operations campaigns that are happening daily, the romanticizing of the lifestyle, it creates ongoers. It creates the new generation of those who continue to fill the ranks. It's wild.
Exactly, man. And X is a big platform for these guys because they know it's harder to keep up with the content of this type on Instagram, Facebook and YouTube, but X will let you go with all this crazy shit. So they're like using X a lot, putting some good money into X.
Do you feel comfortable following those accounts, or do you create a burner account to kind of follow them so that there's separation between you and the information?
No, you know, given what I do, which is I'm a journalist, so I write everything, I report on everything. I'm not hiding my identity or stuff like that. So I'm always using my open name and account on everything. So I follow all these guys, and they follow me back on some of the accounts, but it's always my name. It's so because you know the worst thing on my understanding for a journalist who's trying to understand and embed and basically go inside these criminal organizations is if you're found out with a lie. If by chance they are like, okay, so you're not the owner of this account. You're like, no, I don't know who the fuck that is. And they find out it's you, man. Like, that's going to get you fucked. Whereas I'm like, yeah, that's actually me. And they're going to be like, well, why the fuck did you publish this story or this name or whatever? Like, well, because that's an interesting subject to me. I'm a journalist. This is what I do. I interview people from all across, from Interpol guys to FBI, DAs, to different criminal organizations all around Latin America. So this is what I do. And I have all the proof to prove myself that this is what I'm doing, right? Whereas if I'm hiding my identity, if I'm not saying openly that I'm a journalist and I'm investigating, I'm questioning, whatever, you might get into like deep shit, man.
Yeah, you know, that's part of journalism kind of ethics, right? Is tell the truth, right? And don't do no more harm. And, you know, these ethics that journalists follow. And I would think that in a weird way, it's the whole idea of even bad publicity is good publicity. you telling those stories to give us more information just further tells their story as well. You know what I mean? And so as long as you're not lying about it, I don't see how they would be offended per se, just more so like, oh, he's able to get the information however he does.
That's exactly what's happening. And a lot of people, I get this question a lot, like, why are they telling you the stories? Why are they opening even the fentanyl kitchens to you, whatever? And it's like, first of all, because you get some respect when you've been doing this for years and not lying, not openly lying, probably unknowingly lying, right? Like believing some shitty source that said a lie, whatever, and then I go publish. But then they will reach out somehow, some way, and say, you know what, you fucked up on that info, that it's not actually how this is happening. We'll show you how this is happening. So I'm like, oh, I'm willing to go. And in many of the cases, they're like, okay, man, come over to Michoacan. We'll get you in these, like when they offer me to be inside the droneros, the special drones operators in Michoacan, they literally reach out through social media, say like, hey, do you want to know how exactly these drone things are working? And I'm like, fuck yes, dude. Like, I'm very interested. Okay, show up, come by to Michoacan. We'll pick you up and we'll get you to one of these guys to talk to you. So they offer me all this stuff just because they kind of like respect your job. And they also want like, representation to say like, this is how this is happening for real. Of course, when you're writing or you're producing a documentary or whatever, you have to balance the information. You can be PR for them, right? You can be like, exactly, these are the greatest guys are drone operating and they're like the baddest motherfuckers. You're like, well, yes, they have these drone operators. For the most part, it's still pretty crafty. They're learning. Yeah, they can become more and more deadly. But also they're killing innocent people, although they say no, right? And they know that's not a lie. They know, even though they don't like it, they know you're not lying. So that's how you get respect.
As long as you're not showing bias towards any specific, I guess, group, then you're not a threat to anyone. You're just a journalist.
Exactly. And especially also because it doesn't really serve any purpose for me as a journalist to say the names of people who are, everyone knows their name, right? Like if I say, I don't know, the biggest operator in Vallarta is the WR by the Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación and blah, blah, blah. And this is how he operates. I'm probably not even an issue for him because like, dude, everybody fucking knows. The government knows. I'm paying everyone. But when you go and say the governor of Jalisco is in bed with these guys and these are the companies they have together and blah, 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 then the government is going to be like, oh, motherfucker, now you're blowing our cover. Now you're going to get in trouble. You don't get in trouble with criminal organizations for the most part. You get in trouble with government, corrupted government working for or with criminal organizations. That's when you start getting threats, the calls, the shitty messages, the people outside your house. That's, I mean, at least on my experience, that's when I've gotten like the worst threats in my life.
And has there been moments where you thought like, dang, you might have crossed the line and you might lose your life?
Several moments. I remember one of the earliest one was I was kidnapped by the local police of Ciudad Juarez back in 2010. They got me, they put me on my knees, and the order was to kill me. At the end, they started fighting among the comandantes, the commanders that got me, because one of them wanted to keep my car and some money and then give me a few hours. The other one just wanted to pop me right there. And I took advantage of that fighting between them to flee to the US. Fortunately, I'm a dual citizen, so I have the possibility to go back and forth. So I just literally went for the US, stayed there. I ran, bro. Like I ran. I literally ran and went to the border, went across, and I stayed there for a whole year, the shittiest years of my life because I was scared. My family was still in the Mexican side of the border.
Yeah.
I was depressed. I had PTSD. I was very, very early on in my career. We're talking 2009, 2010. But I was developing sources. And I remember this guy who went in school with me on high school. I took the journalism path. He took the drug trafficker path. But then he called me one day and he was like, hey, where are you, man? And I'm like, I'm working in El Paso. And he's like, what happened to you? And I'm like, no, nothing. I didn't say anything to anyone. I was already a correspondent for a foreign news agency in Spain. I only told them. They wanted to put up like a diplomat note and have me have protection in Juarez and blah, blah, blah. So I was like, no. Let's just keep it on the low. I'm gonna put the well, like a diplomatic note, but not public, just to have a background in case something happens. They know that I got this. Then he called me. Somehow he knew, and he's like, "Well, I'm just calling you to let you know that these fuckers had it. I mean, they were bad cops, and you don't have to worry about them." And on the news that night, they popped all these fuckers in the streets of Juarez. So, I mean, that was
Crazy.
shitty to be honest, but that made me feel like, okay, I probably can come back to Juarez now, right?
Yeah, well, in a sense, you're protected because, I mean, I imagine they have journalists that aren't doing by the ethics of journalism. And so when they find someone who is, they can see how they could be maybe not so much valuable, but at least you're not a threat in a sense.
Yeah, and especially with this guy was that we were friends since high school. And at one point, I remember I was drinking with him 3 in the morning when we were like still young, and I was like already like on my way to be a journalist because I wanted to be a journalist so fucking bad, and nothing was gonna get in my way. So I remember telling this guy like, "Hey, dude, this is what I want to do like for the rest of my life. I'm not publishing in a local newspaper, and I'm very excited for these, whatever." And he's like, "You know that it's gonna come a point where your interests, your job, and everything is gonna compromise what I want to do in my life, and we're gonna take different paths." And he told me that night, he's like, "I guess this is it, man. This is where we break paths, and let's see what happens in the future." And I was like, "Don't be fucking ridiculous, man. It's never gonna be like that. I know you're gonna get into your senses, and you're gonna come back from that life, whatever. It's just that you're struggling with money now, but it's not gonna be like that forever." And he's like, "Well, this is it." And yeah, that was it. That was the last night we actually drank together. We never see each other in person again. But he became one of my first in-depth sources within criminal organizations. So yeah.
It's crazy, man. And you know, the fact that how close you came to losing your life, and you still years later continue to pursue the same subject and the same stories. I commend you on that, because I loved the journalism space, and I would love to get deeper into these subjects like you have. But it's just fascinating to see what you've been doing even since.
Yeah, man. No, I mean there's been different occasions where I'm like, well, this is it. Then that's not it, and I just feel lucky enough, and learn from mistakes, learn from editors will always tell you, una historia no vale la pena. A story is not really worth it, right? But sometimes, dude, sometimes it's like, it's probably worth the risk, It's a one-time opportunity, and this is what I'm gonna die. I know I'm gonna die doing what I do, hopefully from old, right? Probably like on my eldest year, whatever.
So that this job is going to be what ends you as well.
No, yes, man, absolutely. I mean, if it's not someone who's gonna try to do something for me, it's gonna be the stress. It's gonna be all the movement. I'm flying a lot, man, and as you're getting older, your back starts like, oh shit, no, it's not the same catching 3 flights a week when you were 20 than when you're like almost 40. So yeah, man. I mean, these journalism is getting the best of me, and I'm willing to just go with it, until the last fucking day.
I think it's gorgeous, bro, and what you do is incredible. Let me ask, why is there violence on the border Mexican side, and how come it doesn't spill across? Have you heard, these organizations make some kind of pact to make sure it doesn't, or what is the deal with that?
I think it's 2 things. And one of the simplest way to put it is, when you're in a border city, when you're a border kid, that when you're in Juarez, if you toss trash over your window, nothing happens, right? Like, you toss a cigarette, whatever. But that as soon as you get across the border, you're not fucking gonna do that. You're gonna put your cigarette inside your car and keep it there till you get home and put it in the trash, because that you're gonna get a huge fine. You're gonna get 500 fine. You're gonna have to go to court and pay that shit and this and that. You wear your seatbelt as soon as you get across the border, and as soon as you get into Juarez, you're like, oh, this job is killing me, I'm not gonna fucking use it. So that's the same logic amongst criminal organizations. They know they can carry weapons here, shoot here and there, kill this and that, but as soon as they're across the border, they need to lay low. They need to be good citizens for the most part. And if you really need a hit, a lot of what they do is just get someone there, kidnap him, bring him over to Juarez, and kill him in Juarez. but I've seen it myself in different restaurants. Death enemies from different criminal organizations sitting at the same restaurant with their families, saying hi to each other like they're best friends, table to table, saying like, Buenas tardes. And you're like, dude, these guys are fighting to death in Ciudad Juarez, but now they're in El Paso, they're behaving. That's one part. The other part is that when you define a cartel as a group that identifies with a name and a tag, and they played loyalty to their bosses, whatever, that's usually happening in Mexico within the armed branches of a criminal enterprise, right? Those armed branches, they don't exist in the US per se. What does exist in the US is independent operators. If you're transporting drugs or if you're killing for money, you belong to a gang, whatever, in the US for the most part, because violence is not allowed so much in the US, what they do is like, okay, I work for you, Sinaloa cartel, if you pay me well enough, but if the Jalisco cartel is going to pay me more, then I'm going to also work for them. And there's nothing you can do about it. So there's a bunch of independent players that are moving weight for both biggest, largest criminal organizations, laundering money. Sometimes but that's also happening in Mexico. I mean, when you think about all the precursors coming from China to make fentanyl and all this stuff, this port is for the most part controlled by the CJNG. It's a Manzanillo port, right? But the guys controlling that port, the government and everyone, it's getting paid by Sinaloa and Jalisco. So they're sharing, the same guy who's letting all this shit in the country. And they don't have any issue with that.
Does these organizations, do they fear the U.S. government at all?
I think they do. I think they actually do. This is why their worst nightmare is to end up like El Chapo. And I think that's why the US government is making El Chapo an example for the rest of the criminal organizations. They're making his life miserable. It's basically torture what he's getting in jail. He's not allowed to see anyone. He only has 1 hour of light a day. Of sunlight a day. He's lighting in the small room where he's at never goes off. It's turned on 24/7. He's not allowed to communicate with his daughters, with his wife, with anyone. And his attorneys are still trying to put up a case of like, dude, you're torturing an old man, whatever. The government is gonna conceal. They're gonna be like, whatever, man. He's a fucking criminal. We're gonna make an example out of him. So that's where when Elvidio, the son of El Chapo, who was recently extradited, he's like, damn, dude, like, I'm going to face the same fate as my dad, but I'm 32. So he's really young. El Nini, he's chief of security, right? It's going to face the same fate eventually in the US. They do fear the US justice system. Although they know it can be crooked, they do fear the point where they're like, fuck, they're against us. They're coming for us in Mexico, and they're not going to rest until we get extradited and put in a jail in the U.S.
Crazy. So have you heard any conversation about our election that's coming up and what president they would like to see stay in office or be in office?
Dude, this is something that is wild because it feels that it's against the logical thought of it. But when you report on the streets inside criminal organizations, it's just the way it is. They are vouching for Trump so bad because of the rhetoric of Donald Trump on the border. The rhetoric is, no one's going to come in. We're going to deport everyone. We're going to close the fucking border. We're going to fix that border. If you say that, this means money for cartels. It's mean like, oh, okay, so now no one's going to come in. This is going to become so much more expensive because we're going to have to work so much more to get you in. We're going to have to go to desert areas, work tunnels, do this, do that, bribe border patrol officers and this and that. So even though that could be or not be true, well, like when a president like Donald Trump comes strong against like crossing the border, they're like, okay, here comes some money. So many of these guys are vouching for Trump because they know that when Trump was president back then, they were making so much money just because of that. Yeah. That's when the price
supply and demand.
Exactly. That's when the price of like human smuggling spiked up like twice or three times what it was before, right? And we're presidents like Obama, who's very like, no, we're all good for borders. We know that we share a border with Mexico. We're going to find a way to do this and that, even though he was the deporter.
He deported more people than anyone.
More people. And he was the one who built the actual fucking border.
Yes.
Even though that his rhetoric was of like, well, everybody have a chance to come in. We're a welcoming country. So these guys were not making a lot of money, right? They were like, well, we can't sell these to migrants. We can't sell this fear of the border to migrants, but now we can.
Wow. I've never thought of it that way. Yeah, just the way Trump presents the border conversation makes it almost a threat to those that the borders will be closed. So then that ups the price and the challenges that the cartel will have to go through, or these criminal organizations. So then it becomes more lucrative for Trump to be in office.
Yeah, man, this is exactly what I'm not sure if they, because let's think about the Texas governor, right, Abbott. Yeah. I don't think he's a dumb person. I think he's a smart guy. I mean, at the end, he's the governor of one of the biggest states in the US, the most important states, right, bordering Mexico. So I'm wondering if he knows that this is how this works. When he creates fear, when he creates a sense of like, we're going to put and set up barbed wire and the National Guard, and he starts like getting these this rhetoric of like cartels are controlling the border every single day on social media, on the news, and all this stuff. What he's creating is like he's raising the amount of money cartels are gonna be able to charge the migrants because of the fear rhetoric, and they jump on that because right now the way you announce, the way you promote your services as a human smuggler, whatever, all across Central America, South America, is through social, mostly through WhatsApp. Yeah. I'm inside some of these groups with a burner phone, right? With groups of migrants, and there's a bunch of like human smugglers, whatever. Every single thing that Abbott or President Biden or a new politician says about the border, it's immediately monetized on these groups. They're like, this is your last chance to come over. This is going to be the last chance you're going to have. And you need to come now. And the words are spreading. A lot of migrants asking questions like, es posible ahorita? So should I go now? What should I do? I have a young kid. And they're like, oh, you have young kids? Dude, they're going to close the border for kids now. So it's your chance now or never. And and then they start sharing news from Fox News or CNN, whatever, like tweets.
I've seen some stuff recently. Yeah, I saw stuff recently when Trump, you know, the whole Trump case that just happened and he was guilty. There was again, someone sent me the information of a WhatsApp app, just a screenshot that said, Trump's going to jail, keep them crossing the line. And it's almost like, it's like they're using it like, yeah.
They use it, man. They use it right now. Biden just announced that he's going to basically partially shut down the border as we're talking, right? Tonight at midnight, he's going to start this program where after 2,500 people, right, have crossed the border, the asylum system is going to be shut. Dude, this is moving migrants as of right now. This is moving groups. This is being shared all over WhatsApp, saying like the border is going to be closed. You have until midnight. So right now, if I walk down to the border, which is like 15 minutes from where I'm sitting right now, I'm going to start seeing like huge amounts of migrants, and amongst them, a lot of human smugglers saying, hey, dude, don't worry. We have a way in, but it's just going to be harder. So it's going to be more expensive. So now prices are going up again. And this is how this shit works.
All right. So last question. How, if that's not the right way of doing it, or whatever the right way is, how does America slow down this process of illegal immigration, the influx of individuals trying to circumvent our system? Not the asylum seekers. I get that, right? Like we understand that. But how does America actually implement something that slows down this process of all this illegal entries and this business that is so lucrative for the cartels?
I know this is a very complex question because it has to do with a lot of different things, not even happening in the US, but happening probably on these origin countries like Ecuador, Haiti, Venezuela, all these different countries, right? So I think that's one part to start, right? Probably putting money into some like good governments on these places.
Keeping countries where people want to stay and they can have a successful lifestyle in their own countries. Yeah, absolutely. I think helping build infrastructures in other countries for sure.
So I think that's a main thing, right? China knows that, and if you see how much money they put up the past 4 years in Latin America, dude, it's mind blowing. It's 4 or 5 times the amount the U.S. is putting on infrastructure on these countries. So that's what they're getting a lot of representation. It's like, well, the government of China helped us put up this bridge that helped us move agriculture products from the countryside to the cities, and this is great. This is money making for us, and this is creating jobs. So thank you, China government. So this is what they're doing. This is something that the U.S. is not doing on these countries, right?
Yeah.
They're
building. China's building allies, right? Their hearts and minds, and maybe again another psychological operation at its best.
Exactly, man. This is happening like within the past 4 or 5 years. And they're putting more and more money in Latin America. Now, the other thing that could help is to actually have a working asylum system, because a lot of these guys, let's say you have 5 guys trying to enter illegally, and then you have 15 trying to enter the asylum system. From that 15 guys, 5 of them are going to get fed up. So like, dude, CBP1 is not fucking working. This asylum system is not working. You know what? I'm going to call a smuggler. Fuck. So now you're going to have 10 guys going in through the illegal system, paying smugglers and trying to disappear in the system. And within those 10 guys, there might be one who said like, well, now there's a group of 10. It's going to be harder for them to know who I am. So I'm just going to go with that 10. And that's creating a problem. And this is a political asylum system that is not working. It's absolutely it's not running well.
It's definitely a broken system that there's a lot of questions that are hard to answer like that. So I was just curious in your standpoint, we as a country can't take on this many people based on just resources from medical, from disease, from all these different things we have to look at, and we just don't get a chance to because we're so inundated with what's happening right now. And it's a hard. That's why this podcast is what it is. These questions are so interesting to me, and someone who like you, who's boots on the ground, on the line, on both sides of it, I think it's fascinating. Dude, just what we learned today, I think is going to be exciting for the audience, man. Your knowledge is outstanding. I would love to work the line with you one day and see what you do on the U.S. side. Just keep it safer for me. But man, I've been trying to get this interview for a long time, and I'm honored that you were able to share the time with us today, man. Thank you so much.
Really, really appreciate it, man. And I'm loving the podcast. I'm loving your book, man. And whenever you want to come by the border, I can get you safely on the U.S. side, but also the Mexican side. We can put like some like security team that you're gonna get a. Good.
I would love to, man. We'll talk further on that. Please tell the audience where they can go see a lot of your content, where they can find you.
Absolutely. You guys can go to my Instagram, which is where I'm putting most of my content, which is at Luis Kuriaki. But also on my Substack account, when I'm putting the big stories right there, which is www.atsaga.com.
Awesome. We'll make sure we put in the links for this podcast when it comes out. I really appreciate your time, brother. All right, brother. Take care. Thank you so much.
All right, man. Bye-bye. Thank you, man.
Thank you for listening to Borderland and Ironclad Original. Don't forget to give us a like and subscribe everywhere you get your podcasts and on YouTube at This Is Ironclad.